Headed to Santa Monica Airport. Weather says it's clear there. It's crazy foggy here where I live. Alright, so where are we headed today? We're headed to the Planes of Fame Museum in Chino, California today to see the N9M fly. There was only 4 of them built as a proof of concept. One of them crashed, the other 2 were scrapped. The only one that remains is the N9M-B. The N9M was a prototype for the XB-35, which was the long-range, heavy-duty bomber designed and built by Northrop. It's a 1/3 scale model. It's got a 60-foot wingspan. This plane first took flight in December of 1942. It's a Northrop design. I happen to work at Northrop, so I'm pretty excited about this.
Was started in 1957. The story actually goes back to the Second World War. Chino Airport here was a training base known as Cal Aero Field, and it was where primary and basic training took place. Over 10,000 cadets were trained here. By 1944, the Army Air Corps, Army Air Force at that time, had enough pilots and began to close down many of the civilian-run schools, which Cal Aero was. And at that point, the airport took on a new purpose, and they began to bring literally thousands of aircraft that they had deemed obsolete, and they lined them up out on the runways, and then they began to methodically chop them up and melt them down, and they became the cars and the appliances of the 1950 post-war boom. But a young man, 23 years old, who lived in Pomona would come down and see this, and it just appalled him, this idea of taking perfectly good aircraft and chopping them into pieces. So he kind of made a personal pact to save as many as he could, and the very first aircraft he got was a very rare Japanese rocket plane, the Shusui, and that was kind of the start. And he began to keep them at his property in Claremont, and ultimately by '57 he opens what he calls the Air Museum, and it was located at a former lumber yard in Claremont. He had 10 aircraft at the time. The collection continued to grow. At one point they made the decision, let's not only collect the aircraft, let's convert them to flying status and maintain them that way. And we've since moved around to several locations. We were at the Ontario Airport. We were also down in Buena Park at a facility called Cars of Stars and Planes of Fame. That was our non-flying portion of the collection. And then in '74 we moved here to Chino where we combined both the non-flying and the flying collection, and we've been here ever since. We have approximately 135 aircraft in the inventory in 2 locations, one here in Chino and another in southern Arizona near the Grand Canyon, and everything from an authentic Flying Zero to the Flying Wing, the only flying wing of its kind. And we're dedicated really to 4 things: preservation, preserving the aircraft and preserving them to flight status whenever possible, inspiring an interest in education, in aviation among young people in particular, and then educating the public to the history, the personalities, and the events that surround the aircraft, and then finally honoring aviation pioneers and veterans.
Kaiser. I'm one of the volunteers here at Planes of Fame in Chino, and we're standing in front of the OV-1 Mohawk built by Grumman, and it was an observation and surveillance aircraft that entered service in 1960, served in Vietnam. These aircraft also served along the Korean and the German border, and all the way up until the first Gulf War. It replaced the L-19 Bird Dog, 100-mile-an-hour aircraft, and this airplane here is a 300-mile-an-hour aircraft with the electrical power and the room in the fuselage for carrying advanced surveillance systems, including a film camera, infrared camera, side-looking radar, and electronic warfare.
My name is Steve Wallace, and this is Planes of Fame Air Museum. Right now you're in the Enterprise hangar, which is a replica, if you will, of the hangar deck of the USS Enterprise, the famous Enterprise of World War II. The aircraft behind me is a very interesting airplane. This is a Ryan FR-1. The Ryan FR-1 Fireball was an experimental aircraft that was designed in World War II because of the kamikaze threat. Now, the kamikaze threat was insidious. You know, the Navy and actually the U.S. military really didn't know how to combat it. So they put out contracts or bids to various manufacturers to develop an aircraft that would be able to get off the carriers quickly. They weren't interested in range so much as speed, to intercept the kamikazes, shoot them down before they got past or much past the picket ships, which are the radar, the destroyers that had the radar that would pick up the incoming kamikazes. So this aircraft was a result of that. Ryan put a contract together for a jet-powered hybrid aircraft. Now, when you're looking at this airplane, you go, what do you mean jet-powered? It's got a prop on the front, you know, can possibly have a jet. This aircraft had a GE-85 jet engine, which is right next to me over here. That was a midships. It was right in the middle of the aircraft. And if you look at the wing roots, you can see the jet intakes. So this aircraft was able to get off the ground with its recep engine. It was a Wright Cyclone 1820 that would get it off the carrier. It would fire up the jet engine, which would allow enough speed to intercept the kamikazes. And that's all it was designed to do, was to sprint out, get to the kamikazes, shoot them down, and get back to the carrier. So again, it wasn't too interested in the range, it was interested in speed. Now, the story of this aircraft ends with the war ending. The war ended before this plane could go into service. And so it never really intercepted any kamikazes. But what it did, in the 1950s, it served a very useful purpose as a test bed for the embryonic jet engine technology. And the reason for that was that since it had a recip engine built into the design, it could carry an experimental jet engine or gas turbine engine to midships, and that engine flamed out, which they were prone to do during that time. It didn't have to worry about getting back to the base. It just fired up the recip and could get itself back to the base and replace the engine or fix whatever was wrong with it. So it served a very useful purpose as a test aircraft. And if you look closely, you can see big test written on the side of the fuselage. Now, and that's what it did. You know, so its claim to fame was it ended up as a test aircraft serving a very useful purpose in testing very early jet engines. But as far as we know, there's only one of 2 or 3 of these aircraft left in the world, and they're probably in the Smithsonian or in the Udvar-Hazy. But this aircraft may be in the National Air Museum in Dayton, Ohio. But this aircraft could be flown. It would take, like any of our projects, you know, it would just take time and money to get it back. But it's in pretty good shape. Very interesting airplane, and we're pretty proud to have it in an Enterprise hangar. The aircraft behind me is a Grumman aircraft. This is an F-7 Tiger Cat. This aircraft was designed during the end of World War II and was a fighter. Now, most people look at it as a twin-engine aircraft. It's got to be a bomber or a fighter bomber. This was designed as a fast attack aircraft, a fighter aircraft. It was extremely fast. The war ended, World War II ended before it could go into service, but it was used heavily in the Korean War. And the variant we have here, and it's got this bulbous nose on it, and that's a radar aircraft. So this was a night fighter. It was a pretty famous airplane. It was ahead of its time and probably the biggest, at the time, the biggest Grumman carrier-based aircraft built. Okay, we're back in the Enterprise hangar, and the aircraft we're looking at again is a Navy, in this case a Marine aircraft. This is a Grummond F9 Panther. It's one of the first carrier-borne jet aircraft that was used heavily in the Korean War. And it evolved into a number of different configurations. One of them had a swept wing, and it was called a Cougar. So Grumman got a lot of use out of this aircraft, as did the U.S. Navy and the U.S. Marine. So we're lucky to have it. Again, this is a non-flying aircraft, and like many of our projects, you know, all it takes is somebody to step up and fund the project.
Hey there, my name is David Vopak. I'm one of the volunteers and one of the pilots on the Northrop N9M Flying Wing, and we just did a demonstration today with a group of people with presentation. Just a little bit of talk about my involvement. Planes of Fame has about 53 flying airplanes currently, and we keep them all going as often as possible to events that people get to see and enjoy. the history and appreciate the national heritage of some of these special machines like the Northrop Flying Wing. I was asked to fly the airplane. I was pretty used to flying a wide variety or a difference of aircraft types, from a Laird to corporate jet to some of the airline equipment. Lots of antiques, some World War II fighters, the Mustang P-40, F3F example. So anyway, so I was chosen, I think, because I'm available, spent a lot of time dedicated as a volunteer, and then a diversity of aircraft flown. We certainly have a huge appreciation for the Northrop Flying Wing, and it's certainly very precious to the museum, but importantly to history. And so I have the opportunity to fly it. It's a lot of work. It's, as most people know, it's a prototype, proof of concept. So it's similar to a Formula One race car where it needs some attention continuously. It's not a turnkey machine like a Bonanza. Nice. It flies similar to maybe a bomber. The control inputs are certainly there. It's hydraulically controlled, so it's got cable actuated flight controls with power assist hydraulically, and is dynamically assisted, so variable rate with airspeed. That was one of the Northrop features that kind of took ahead of time, one of the many. But anyway, so we display the airplane probably 4 or 6 times a year, depending on what's going on in local aviation. And again, it flies probably similar to a bomber. I've flown the B-24 and the B-25, and it has controls similar. Actually, I've flown the B-29 a few times, had my hands on the controls. And so it's not super responsive, but it's all there. Controls feel nice, obviously without a vertical surface or conventional rudders. The yaw inputs have to be soft and light, almost delicate. Less input is better, and the airplane is then more stable. So we enjoy the airplane, we enjoy having it out. We had it at Palmdale at the B2 celebration for the initial or original test flight, and again, it's something with Northrop that we greatly appreciate.
Chino Tower, Cessna 84347, holding shoulder runway 26 right for a straight out departure.
84347, Chino Tower, runway 26 right, cleared for takeoff, wind 25013.
26 right, clear for takeoff, 847.